Welcome back to iCoach Nutrition Radio. Today, guys, I have a very special guest, somebody that was on actually about a year ago talking to us about intermittent fasting. So it's quite the coincidence to have him on about a year later. And I'm super excited to be able to kind of dive into essentially the state of the union here. We are experiencing kind of the COVID-19 epidemic, the pandemic that we're in right now, and it's really kind of turned a lot of people's world upside down. And so I'm excited to be able to dive into that conversation and how him and his clients have been affected since the transition, and try to provide as much value as possible. So without further ado, Mr. Andreas Ayesta, he is the founder of Vive Nutrition. What's going on, my man? How are you?
Good, man. Thank you so much for having me again, and happy to be back into iCoach Radio.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to have you. I've been, as we were talking a little bit before, just kind of following along the journey over the last year. So just for the audience here, let's I guess take it back. So a year ago today, like where were you at just with like life and your business and everything going on? And then where are you at now, just so that everybody can have a little bit of context?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm like now thinking of specifically where I was doing exactly April 15th. And it had been like only 2 weeks after I left my full-time job to become a full-time entrepreneur. So it's been, now that I think about it, I literally just turned a year since I've been, on my own. Still, I survived. One of the things that a lot of times, like people, when they jump out of the employment bandwagon, they just kind of like afraid if they're going to be able to make it and survive and being able to eat. So I did. I'm happy to report that. But things have been going pretty well. So Vegan Nutrition has grown a lot ever since we kind of last chatted, and we continue to help people improve their lifestyles through personalized nutrition coaching, and just really trying to be as active as possible, specifically during these times where there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of people that need a lot of support and feel like they're connected to others during this time of, I wouldn't call it social distancing, but more physical distancing. I do think right now we're more connected than we've ever been, and we're just not physically connected. So there, the physical aspect and like the in-person interactions are not there, but then the social interaction part of it, I think literally it's, I've been talking to people that I haven't talked in years as a result of this. So I think that's kind of been the silver lining of this entire situation, if I may.
Yeah, no, honestly, I love that. I haven't even really thought about that as much, but definitely experienced that myself as well. I think the thing for me that's been most exciting is just like in my neighborhood, just like walking around and like, me and my family, like we go on walks together, but like we've never been so active as we are now, and I look in my neighborhood and it's like everybody, all the families, they're walking around, they're going for walks, they're going for bike rides. Like it's just, there's, I think in the beginning when all of this happened for me, like obviously like anybody else, right? You start watching the news, like that headspace starts going to a negative place. Like, I had some clients unfortunately get laid off, and a lot of things are happening, a lot of things are changing. And so it's really easy to start going to kind of that dark place, that negative place. And you have to snap out of that. And it takes longer, for some than others, right? But
Yeah.
I think once you can start shifting to kind of that abundancy mindset and looking for the positives, right? I think for me that was really when I was able to kind of start flipping that switch. And obviously, like there's a reality that we're living in, and like me being in Texas, like it's nowhere near to somewhere like New York, right? But I think still just being able to focus on, all right, what are the things that I actually have control over versus like, what are the things I don't have control over, and where am I deploying that energy, right?
Yeah, and I think it's always been. I tell a lot of people, talk to a lot of people about reframing situations and finding, kind of opportunities. I think specifically from our field and health and fitness, I think most people have always kind of used timing excuses as a way to kind of put, I guess, like put away like the goals that they're trying to achieve, and now they just don't have those excuses actually anymore. Like it's not a time for you to start to think like, oh, I don't have time to do this, because this is a good time for you to start to focus on yourself. The way I kind of explain to people, like like, I guess like the universe has kind of given us a break. And not saying that this pandemic is like anything positive in any kind of like way or shape or form, but it has actually kind of created a shock of reality of so many different things that are, happening, that we can positively kind of look at it. Of course, like, if you do have, get, with this like virus and thing, if you get it, of course that's not fun. But then from those of us that kind of remain isolated and healthy, it's like an opportunity for you to start to think about, okay, like what are some of the things inside of me that I need to work on. And nutrition and fitness sometimes like actually kind of come as common denominators in many people. And because of the fact that you're kind of forced into this kind of situation, it kind of helps you reflect on how you can take this as an opportunity for improvement, not necessarily an opportunity for you to feel isolated and, filled with anxiety, as many people have decided to kind of go towards to, and just kind of get so wrapped up around news and social media and all those different things, and kind of use that negatively instead of positively. So that's what
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I from that first point you made there, I've been joking with clients. I'm like, look, guys, like, the excuse before was like, I don't have time, and like now, for most of you, like, you have more time than ever before,
Yeah.
and it's essentially just eliminated you basically have more time than ever before, and you're making less excuses than ever before, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it's been interesting. I mean, honestly, and I'm curious to hear your take on this, but I think for me, one thing that has made me like really proud as a coach is like, obviously, like there are some clients that are struggling more than others, of course. But I think for the most part, with the clients that I'm working with one-on-one, like it's almost like the work that we've been doing up into this point has now like set them up to be successful and to really thrive during this time. What's kind of your take on that? What's your
I
experience with
agree.
like
I
all of
think
the
I think
clients
a
that I
lot
work
of
with?
at first I was a little scared when this whole thing started, because I just felt a lot of people would retreat and they would try to kind of like, hunker down and figure like, well, this is not a good time for me to focus on my nutrition. But I was actually pretty happy to see how most people actually kind of change their perspectives. um I have been talking to some people that, for example, like, have said that the anxiety that this whole process have generated have, in other scenarios and situations when they were alone, which means like obviously not having the support from a coach, would have put them in a really dark space, as you kind of mentioned it earlier. It would have put them in a place where they would have been making really bad, terrible food decisions. And, I think one of my clients actually says, like, I think I would be 20 pounds heavier if I didn't have you during this difficult time. So I honestly think that people, they, when they feel supportive and they feel accountable, like, I think when this whole thing started, people could have taken two routes, as I mentioned earlier. They could have taken the route of like the victim, and like, I'm like, why is this happening to me, and why is this happening to the world, and I'm just going to just gonna like take a little like, personal vacation until like this is all over. I'm just going to do what I need to do to get by, whether that was work, or for some other people it actually wasn't work. Or you could literally took the route like, most of my clients took, which is, what, this is a time where I'm going to be focusing on how can I improve many different areas of my life. And I usually kind of tell most of my other people that I'm working with right now, including the ones that are starting now, which is a good time to do so. I say, I want you to go into this quarantine, and I want you to come out of it better than when you started. Right. So like, I want you to literally finish out this time. And like, since you have been in physical isolation and physical distancing, that people would come out of this and says like, what did you do during all this time? And how did you accomplish all these different things? And that's exactly the point that I want people to kind of get to. And this is the right time for that, because there's just no distractions that are keeping you from that, versus the internet and social media, which, you can kind of establish specific limitations around that. So this is a good opportunity.
Yeah, I completely agree, 100%. So let's talk about some of those, right? And obviously some of these are more obvious than others, but what have you seen and what have some of the comments been with the clients around what are like the positives that we're seeing, right, from all of this in relation to nutrition, fitness, and mindset, just kind of working towards their goals? Like, for example, right, like one thing that I always talk about with clients is like they were commuting to work, right? They were commuting to work, they were commuting back from work. That was 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, however long that may have been. And so it's like, what are we doing with that extra hour, that extra 2 hour?
Yep.
Where are we deploying that newfound time that we have, right? So that's just
Yeah.
an example. But what are some that you've had?
Yeah, so I think time management has been one, definitely because of the fact that you mentioned it yourself. You now have 2 hours in a day that you didn't have before. I think a lot of people, again, like they can take two routes. They can say, I can sleep this, I can sleep in. And I have more time for me to just like, sleep the time that I didn't really get a chance to before. Or you can say, I'm just gonna continue to focus and sleep and waking up at the same time, and now incorporating new habits and new routines that can help me, or can support my goals. So this is what I say. You said you never had time to work out. Well, guess what? Now the hour commuting you don't have in the afternoon, and now in the hour in the morning, now you have it. So what's the excuse? So number one, obviously time management. Number two is resourcefulness. And I think this comes with the fact that, with gyms like closing down, that's never been, we never experienced something like that, and I think many people have become, including ourselves, very resourceful into how their fitness can change and how their fitness can be taken to anywhere, like decades and like I don't even know, like thousands of years ago, I bet that there were not gyms around, and people still managed to be able to find ways to stay fit and to do a lot of those different kinds of things by being outside. And I think right now, people are becoming more resourceful around that, building home gyms out of everything. Like, when you go to like Home Depot, or like even like Tractor Supply, like, I went the other day to buy this like mats for like for weights, and like they're saying, the guy told me like we usually have 8 pallets of these things, and now we have literally 1 pallet left, and it's already halfway gone. So people have started to find ways to become resourceful around fitness and training. So I think that's been really positive, and it's really exciting, because when this is over, like, going and taking the time to go to the gym will not become an excuse anymore, because you do have the chance to do stuff at home. So that's another big one too. Number three is the fact that most people are not necessarily spending so much money out. Bars are closed, so you're not getting a ton of alcohol, unless, well, some people are, because they're taking this as an opportunity to kind of like, just to kind of calm their anxiety around all these different things. But for the most part, you're not, kind of like splurging money on like alcohol. And even restaurants, like for as much as restaurants will remain open, like, in a takeout manner and stuff like that, it's still not the same. So I don't think people are getting food from outside sources as much. So that kind of gets you um, to kind of a point where you're just forced to learn how to cook and do all different things like that. So I think that's also another huge kind of like positive environment. And number three is, you can only consume so much information on social media. And sometimes you just want to, like, it's happened to me. I'm like, you know what? I got enough of this. It's been way too much. Like, because before we would just like stop using our phones by the time we were interacting with people in person. Even so, that's not always the case. But now, since we're so used to like being at home, sitting down, like, what do you do after you're done with work? You go and you sit down, you either watch TV or you consume information on social media. It gets so much to a certain point that people are finding some new ways and opportunities to just do other stuff. Like you mentioned earlier, going on a walk, or playing, like we played cards for like the first time in like years the other day, or like, spending time, at home, or like, my wife actually, she did this, little, like date night, and basically she created like outside of our house, like she did this little like open bar thing and kind of set up. So I think creativity, it's probably what I'm trying to say here, and doing things that are kind of falling outside of the norm of what our typical society kind of dictates that what we need to do. And the combination of all those things above, I guess, like, to kind of finish up this thought, is they kind of like teaching us how to live a different life that we never thought we could live, in which we're actually becoming more in tune with ourselves and not necessarily with the outside world.
Yeah, I love that, man. I 100% agree. I think that I mean, again, it all lies in like where is the opportunity in all this, right? Going back to what you said, like the victim versus the victor mentality, right? And it's the choice. I think that's the most empowering thing of it all, is it's like, it truly is like our choice, right? Like, there's nobody else. Even if you have a coach, like there's nobody else that's going to make you actually do the work, or make the decision. And with all of this stuff, it's like, of course waking up early is hard, of course working out is hard, of course, like, eating healthy versus going and ordering food from a restaurant is hard. All of those decisions are harder. It's easier to do the alternative, but it's just like, what am I doing the majority of the time? Not every single decision you make has to be perfect in line with your goals, but like the majority of those decisions do. If not, you're not going to get to the goal that you want, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. I'd love to hear your take on this. So, how with the alcohol conversation, right? You said that there are those that aren't taking advantage of this. There's less social outings, so hopefully there's less drinking. But for some people, like, they're hitting up the essential business of a liquor store. What's your take on that? Like, isn't that crazy to you that a
Yeah.
liquor store is deemed an essential business?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of other places that are still considered essential businesses, and I don't really know how. But that's one of them that just still kind of strikes me and shocks me. But I think it's kind of like gas stations and stuff like that. Some other places, like, I do agree. I think it's just definitely not considered essential. But in the 21st century that we live in, alcohol is ingrained in all of our lives. So I think I can see why, but not necessarily that I agree with. Um, but at the same time, I think going in line with that, I think people are using alcohol as a way to kind of like fill a void that sometimes they don't know how to fill, because now they just don't have. And for me, it's not necessarily being so marked because I have been working from home for a long time. So for me to create routines around this time, it hasn't been difficult. For me, what's been really hard is the fact that I cannot go to the gym community that I used to go to. And you and I both kind of like do similar type of CrossFit style training. So it was kind of nice to kind of be exposed to that community aspect. So that's been hard. Or going on a date night, going out to dinner, traveling. We love to travel. So that for us has been the hardest part. For other people, however, specifically if you are, single, or in like you live in a really small apartment, alcohol has been used as a, kind of like a way to kind of, I don't know, like get some areas of your life dormant, and just essentially to try to kind of cover some of those things. And it has been kind of like an outlet for that. And now because of, and some people losing their jobs as well. So just like food has become soothing for some people, alcohol has also been the case. So with that, there's obviously some negatives that may come out of this pandemic, and one of them being obviously people's relationship with food, where they don't really kind of are going that route that is not ideal. And also the same thing with alcohol, so I think it comes down to making sure that you're making the right decision that will be supportive of what you're trying to get out of this time. But that's going to ultimately come down to that, to the fact that it's a pretty good positive goal that you want to achieve right now. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, I mean, the alcohol piece, I mean, essentially it's an escape from reality in a sense, right? So yeah, I think the big picture here is, like, at first, for a lot of people, I think we didn't know, there were so many unanswered questions, right? We didn't know what this timeline was going to look like, and like, it's interesting when you look into like the 5 stages of grief, right? And you start to go through those steps, and it's like, man, like, I kind of went through that, right? And you start talking to people, and they're like, yeah, I did too, right? So I think in the beginning, there was some people that they were just like, maybe they weren't working out, maybe they were drinking more, maybe the stress was up, the anxiety was up, and now as things have kind of like normalized a little bit in terms of like, hey, this is our new norm, this is the reality for the next 2 months or however long, whatever, right? So it's like, I've got to start putting some things into action here. I've got to start to create some structure, right, in my daily life here. And so I think for so many people, especially that Monday through Friday, what was the structure that you had before, and how can you recreate it in a sense,
yeah,
right?
that's great. I was just talking I did like a WeWork workshop, and that's what exactly what we're gonna be talking about in our online summit that we're doing on Saturday, which is specifically what I'm gonna be covering is actually developing bulletproof routines and habits that can help you succeed and thrive on a day-to-day basis. Um, One of the things I remember, Tony, he was my former mentor when we were working together. One of the things that he told me once when I left my full-time job, he said, you know what, Andres, now that you're leaving your job, you have two choices. you can now, because you're on your own boss, you can now choose to do whatever the F you want, or you can choose to actually, like, do the things that are going to be supportive of your business ideals and goals and vision, right? So the same thing I tell to people right now, whether you work for a company, whether you work for yourself, or whatever may be the case, you have to make the decision on what do you want to focus on. And once you make that decision, which I know for most people is going to be like, I want to succeed, I want to make money, I want to do these things, I want to lose weight, I want to do all those different things, then you can kind of start taking the first step, which is developing a really strong routine and habit plan. So what does that mean? Like I have always, like, what I was talking about today is like, you need to, in order for you to be able to build a new habit, you need to make sure you break it down into its anatomy, which is going to be, most habits are broken down into a trigger, a routine, and a reward or response. So like a trigger is usually something that it kind of like starts it. So for example, if it's like eating chocolate, for example, like maybe hearing some bad news is what triggers it, and the routine is eating chocolate, and the reward is the chocolate itself. So when you're trying to create new habits, you have to rewire your brain to make them happen. The first step that you can take is starting with your mornings. If your mornings are not set up for success, then your full day is not going to set up for success. So how to set up a very strong morning habit? By creating a really good, strong routine. And by that, and I was just like talking about like a story when I started my morning routine, and even when I was working a full-time job, this completely changed my life. Is when I listened to a podcast episode with Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins, and he was talking about the fact that Tony Robbins was talking about the fact that every morning he wakes up and he has, in one of his like multiple mansions around the world, and every single one of them, he has this like little pool. It's like this little, like literally it's like five, like I think it's like 6 by 6 feet foot tall, 6 by 6 pool plunge. And it's always at 52 degrees. And he says the first thing he does every single morning, regardless of the part of the world that he's in, is he plunges in that pool, and then he just kind of gets to start up with his day. So that kind of got me started into thinking like routines are important to kind of start off your day. So the two things that I started doing is I started waking up early, and then I started to actually live in a house that had a pool. So I was like, I need to do like a pool plunge. So I'm just going to do that. Of course, I moved and I didn't have a pool anymore, but I realized that it was not jumping on a pool that made the difference. It was more of the routine and creating the habit every single morning. So I started doing a few different things. Number one, I started to kind of jump, like, waking up earlier a little bit every single time. Eventually, I kind of got down to like 4 a.m. in the morning. I don't do that anymore because I realized sleep is important. So now I wake up at 5:30. So I have like a specific time that I'm like always up in the morning, and I go through a specific kind of ritual for me that involves reading morning pages, which includes my gratitude, and at the same time also doing some meditation, and now having incorporating my workouts in the morning as well. So what I realized doing all this is the fact that you're starting off your morning a really, really good positive vibe, and with that your day actually goes in a much better way as well. So if you're starting your morning, and this is what most people do, they wake up, and what's the first thing that is right next to them when they open their eyes? Their phone, right? So they look at their phone, they open their social media, they read the news, and in some cases it depends. Like, you pick your poison. You open the social media, and the first thing that you see is a photo of like a photo of a hot model, or like some guy with a six pack, and then immediately you're like, fuck, I'm not even there yet. Like, F this, I'm not gonna do it, whatever. And then you're already kind of starting the day wrong. Really, currently with this pandemic, you wake up and the first news you read is like, you're gonna have to another extension of your 30-day stay at home order, and now you're gonna be locked up at home another 30 days. So that kind of starts off your day in a really negative space, and all that does is just kind of creates a lot of negativity on what's next to come in your day. So that day for you in your mind is ruined, and then that does not set you up for success. So instead, what I tell people is, do not open up social media, email, nothing from the outside world until you focus on your inner self first. And once you get that done, then you can open up to the world, check your email, start your workday, and then, but at least you have that headspace in the right, place. I guess it's probably the best way to describe it. And after that, the second step that I usually tell people to take after you develop a morning habit or a morning routine is to make sure that you set up yourself a schedule for the day. because I think a lot of people, like, if you are not having a schedule, a, specific goals and targets you're gonna try to achieve for the day, what you're gonna do is you're gonna be kind of like spinning in circles all day long. And whether you did 3 things or 10 things, it's never going to be enough. It's happened to me all the time. If I don't have the 2 to 3 top things that I need to get done by the end of the day, I will probably going to finish the day, because I'm an overachiever and I'm a type A personality. I'm going to always feel that I didn't do shit. It's always that way. So instead, if you say, you know what, I need to do this and this and that, and this is my schedule. And what I've been telling a lot of my clients is like, schedule your meals, schedule your walks, schedule all those different things, because that's going to help you stick to a routine. Whether you do it perfectly or not, at least you're kind of getting into the habit of creating it. And then you're gonna finish up your day, and he's like, did you do your 3 things? I actually did. Did you go on a walk? Yes, I did. Great. So that was a successful day. You didn't do it? Okay, what happened? Why didn't you do it? And then what can you do instead in the future to try to prevent that from happening? So we with this entire like life change that we're kind of experiencing, people are changing the way that they live because of that. Like, they're not going to on a lunch break anymore, because the lunch break they created. So you have to be disciplined enough to create it yourself. You have to be disciplined enough. Like, this is a typical excuse. Well, now I have the kitchen, so I can just go and like whip something up real quick, because I don't have to like prep my lunch to bring it to work. That's a mistake, because of that same reason, you're going to just simply whip up whatever it's like come handy at first, and then you're going to go back into your office, and then you didn't really make good food choices that are kind of be supportive of the goals that you're trying to achieve. So it could be a really, working from home could be like a very great thing, but it could also be something that can hurt you a lot if you don't really create the right strategy, the right structure, the right mindset around it. And that's how I would start. And just to finish up this thought would be to also make sure that you're creating a good, as you create a morning routine, a good nighttime routine as well. And staying up until like 3 o'clock in the morning watching Netflix because you have a little more time to wake up in the morning, or a little more time in the morning because you don't have to be at work at 7 a.m. It's not probably a pretty good idea, because again, it's just kind of disrupting a little bit more a schedule that your body really is so craving to create. So that's kind of like the way that I've been trying to explain many people to kind of approach a situation.
Yeah, I love that, man. I mean, honestly, it's for my clients that are listening to this podcast right now. They're like, man, y'all are y'all sound similar. But it's so funny, right? I mean, it goes back to like the age old tale of like, make your bed first thing in the morning, right? Like get that win to start your day, right? And I've seen it in myself. Like obviously you've been working from home for a little bit now. Like I've been working from home for 3 years now, and it's like the first probably 6 months, like maybe even 6 months to a year, like I really, really struggled with figuring all this out. But like now I've gotten it figured out. But like 1000%, the way I start my day dictates everything, right? If I don't do my morning routine, and I think the thing I notice the most is like my Monday through Friday, because I typically don't do my morning routine on Saturday and Sunday. So it's like I every single week I get the reminder of how important the Monday through Friday is of doing it, right?
Yeah.
But it 100%, if I don't do my morning routine to start the day, then I'm automatically going to be more reactive, more negative, right? And so I think it goes back to like, what's the saying? It's like failure to plan is planning to fail,
Yeah.
right? And so planning, that's being proactive, right? And so that goes back to like being proactive from a day-to-day perspective, from a week-to-week perspective, from a month to month, a quarterly, a yearly, right? Like the people that have the systems and the structure like that, like they're the ones that are always the most productive, and they always accomplish the goals, and like they're always the most successful, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So I love that, man. Well, cool. So what about the clients that, and I don't know if you've had any, I hope that you haven't, but I unfortunately, I have had a few clients that have gotten laid off. And obviously like I've been there and trying to support them as much as I can. Right. But that's a situation that is like really kind of like out of their control in a sense. Right. And so like, it's going to bring a whole new level of stress, anxiety, and fear and all of these emotions. Have you had anybody like that at all? Have you
A couple
had that
people, yeah,
experience?
yeah. So it's hard, man, and I cannot even, and even us as I think it's pretty safe space to talk about this ourselves as entrepreneurs, that we're I guess consider, small businesses. So we thrive on people to have jobs and to have employment, because it's because of them or because of that they can afford to kind of have a nutrition coach to work with and stuff like that. So on their end and in our end as well, is it's a matter of understanding, are we going to get stressed about it? Fuck yeah, we are. We will be. Like, it's going to happen, man. Like, we can't really do anything about it. But what we can do is kind of change our perspective and then understand that this is something that is, as you mentioned earlier too, it's kind of falling completely outside of our control. You cannot help the fact that there's a pandemic. You cannot help the fact that the company needs to cut out cost and expenses by laying people off, so they can kind of support and stay alive. Like, that's the reality of it. Now, what you can change is figuring out exactly what's the next step that you can take. And instead of kind of digging yourself a hole and figure out exactly, or kind of saying to yourself again, like the victim versus victor type of mentality, saying, I won't be able to pay mortgage, I won't be able to pay my bills and all those different things. Again, not everybody has the entrepreneurial mindset, but at least trying to figure out what is the next step. Like, I'll give you an example. My brother, he works in timeshare and he lives in Vegas. He actually he moved to Vegas. He lived in Orlando and he moved to Vegas literally the first week of March, 1 week exactly before the whole thing actually blew up in the United States. So imagine, obviously, moving into this place. He works for a timeshare company that he makes money based on commission and sales and interacting with people one-on-one in person. So of course, what's the first thing that the hotel, the resort actually did? Like, they send everybody home, and they say, you know what, and if he doesn't sell, if he's not making any money. So he said, you know what, I'm gonna buy my $35 plane ticket to Tampa, because that's what they cost right now. And I'm going to just kind of hang out with you guys. And like right now, guess what's he doing? He's actually doing Instacart, right? So he's adapted and overcoming. Is he going to make the same amount of money he was making before? No, but at least he is being productive and he's trying to make money instead of being kind of like hunkered down in his, like, in a room and just kind of, figure out exactly what he's going to do and how he doesn't have enough money, right? So I think people need to become resourceful. And there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And whoever says like, oh, like it, and it takes like that kind of victim role because we're making six figures a year and now they're literally laid off and they don't know how that's going to happen. Well, sitting at home and not doing anything is not going to help the situation. And a lot of times it's easier said than done. I get that, because if I was put in that situation, if I was like, knock on wood, that it doesn't happen, like, I would lose all my clients overnight, then I would probably be in a really headspace that would be very stressful and negative. But your ability to be able to overcome that and to kind of get through it and then start off your day again, like just like you did before, it needs just kind of like how you got that job, just kind of like how you did all the different things, how you started that business, you can do it again. So it's about understanding the power of opportunity, the power of reframing situations, and literally letting go of the shit that you cannot control. And you getting laid off, you cannot blame anybody for that. It's a reality that we're living, and it's all about how you change your perspective and your attitude towards it, and what can you do to kind of replace that.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. I mean, it's the saying of, life's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to it, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's like everybody's situation is different, right? And so like I could never try to put myself in the shoes of somebody's situation. I mean, I have, some clients that, I all I can do is just pray for them. I mean, I couldn't ever even imagine, the
Yeah.
situation that they're in. And so it's hard. I think everybody's kind of on their own timeline with it, and everybody's kind of responds in a different way. Some people, they're hyper responders and like they're like they channel right into action, and for other people, it takes a few weeks or months or however long. So I'm no judgment of that, but hopefully my encouragement, and I know yours as well, would be to like, there's an opportunity to plug yourself into so many amazing like communities, right? Like you have a free private Facebook group. I have a free private Facebook group. There's tons of awesome coaches that have free private Facebook groups. And so like plug yourself into these communities, get involved, like surround yourself with, again, as much of a positive environment as you possibly can. And that goes back to the social media, the news, like all of that, right? And try to control the narrative in your life as much as you possibly can, because the negative is not going to move you forward. The positive is the only thing that's going to move you forward.
Yeah, I agree.
So I love it, man. Well, cool. So what about you kind of like, specifically here, like obviously the workout piece is probably the thing that's impacted you the most. And me, for me as well, like I'm blessed that I kind of like bought like a home gym like set up like years and years and years ago. And so like I can do pretty much anything that I want in there, which is awesome. But like I definitely wish I was going to Cowboys Fit and like having access to like everything there, right?
Yeah.
Um, so like I guess for you, like with the workout standpoint, like I think for a lot of people, like myself included, and a lot of like the people that were doing kind of like a structured strength program, they're like, man, like I'm gonna lose my gains, right? Like I'm gonna lose all my muscle because I don't have equipment and all I can do is like body weight workouts, or maybe they just have like bands or dumbbells. So like have you had any of that thought to like come into mind to you, or I'm
Yeah.
sure clients have brought that up, and how have you kind of I guess
Yeah.
talked them
I
off the
think
ledge with that?
I think it's setting realistic expectations that you're not gonna get jacked, or I guess like build muscle mass. Like if you don't have access to a ton of equipment, but doesn't mean that you're not gonna be able to progress. Like honestly, I am working out. I'm not gonna say harder, but I'm working out more right now than I did when I was going to a CrossFit gym. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, but it's because of the fact that, you think about it, like we live like 50 minutes away from the gym. It's like stopping work, getting ready, like going to that place, and then getting the workout in. And usually, how there's like a lot more of the social interaction and like talking to people and stuff like that. So the whole process took two and a half hours, right? So right yesterday, like I got a workout in, like, or I think Monday was like the day that I did like a live workout with one of my friends, and we partnered up, and he's been running classes in the morning. So I did like, it was more about cardio, like full body type of workout, like all body weight. And then in the afternoon, I did something a little bit more intense because I'm lucky enough to kind of have a barbell here now and everything. But I did a little something more intense. In the past, I would never actually be working out twice in a day, but I was able to actually make it work that way. So I think for people, if you're talking about, for example, let's say males or females that are afraid to kind of lose their gains, there are ways to make workouts um, intensive enough to create a stimulus to maintain. That's the way I would kind of like say it. Like at the same time, making sure that your nutrition is on point. This may not be a time for you to actually be trying to get shredded and to be fully kind of creating that massive calorie deficit. So that's something also to consider as well. But for those that are afraid, which is the opposite, that they're going to gain or they're going to like add, like, the people call it like, I call it like the COVID 15. So basically the 15 pounds that people are gonna gain from it, or like the quarantine 15, as some other people call it. I think that's a complete like total excuse to something that is just not necessary. And if it's happening to you, is because simply you just don't have like the previous things that we talked about during this entire conversation. So I honestly, like most people that don't have equipment, like they can't make it work. Now, is it going to be more difficult? It requires a little more motivation and more creativity. Sure, it does. But that's the main thing. Like I think most people really need to focus on movement more than like structure and having this like crazy elaborate plan, because it's a reality. Like we're in the middle of a freaking pandemic. Like we can't really be thinking of like, oh, my gains and stuff like that, but just more focusing on what can you do to maintain what you have, stay fit, stay healthy, reinforce your immune system. And then when this is all over, you can resume where you were at in the past. Like if you ask me, like, okay, I was working on strength. Am I working on strength right now? I don't have like, I have barely like 2 plates of like 45 pounds each because our gym actually lended it to us. So I can't do heavy squats. I can't do all the different things. Yeah, this morning I was doing, a lower body workout that was pretty intense and pretty good, and I feel good about it. So again, it's all like reframing your mind as far as like what you want to do, and then like living according to the world's standards right now, which in this case is gyms are closed, and unless you have a very full capacity gym at home, it's okay if you just focus on movement and staying active. Now, what the biggest mistake most people would make is saying, well, since I don't have gym equipment, I'm just not going to work out at all. That is complete BS. And I think that's like the one approach that people should not take, because that's just simply kind of giving up on goals and everything. So I think that's a mentality that we shouldn't really be focusing on. and we should definitely kind of go the other way.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I always tell clients, I'm like, look, control the controllables, right? Focus on the things you have control over, right? And going back to the workout piece, like it's like, where is the opportunity in all this? Like, maybe for the strength bias people, myself included, right? And I should take this advice, is I haven't really been doing all that much cardio, right? My cardiovascular system is not that great. It's definitely not as good as it was when I was competing at regionals and CrossFit. That's for sure. Right. So it's like, maybe it's an opportunity where you need to improve your mobility, or you need to improve your cardio piece, or you need to improve gymnastics, or I mean, there's definitely opportunity, right?
Yeah.
It's just looking for that opportunity, and really just having the mindset of like, again, it's like, where can I kind of like progress through this. One thing that like I talk to a lot of clients with is like, don't break the chain when it comes to moving. Like, you are a human being. Like, you should be moving every single day of your life. Like, some people are like, walk 8 to 10,000 steps a day or whatever. And so I'm like, I don't care if it's walking or lifting weights or doing CrossFit or doing yoga or whatever, but like, move every single day. Like, move for 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes every single day.
Yeah.
And have the mindset of like, you're not going to break the chain, right? Like, no matter if it's raining outside or whatever, like, just move your body every single day. Like, congratulations, you got you got awarded the fact that you're a human being. Like, a human
Yeah.
beings are made to move, and you have more time. So, let's do it. Let's move,
Yeah. I agree.
So I love it, man. Well, cool. So I want to definitely respect your time here. I know you're a busy man. Hopefully, you got a little bit more time in your hands now with just how crazy everything is here.
Yeah.
But let's kind of wrap it up for the listeners. Let's give them like the action items right here. So basically, where we're at right now, with everything going on, it's essentially April. What is it today? April 15th.
15.
Taxes would be due today, but they got pushed back. That was
Yeah.
nice. So what, if for anybody listening right here, and I know this is kind of like a general question, but like, if you had to give them, let's say, like 3 like action items or like checklist items as to like, hey, let's focus on these 3 things. If you're not focused on anything else at all, let's focus on these 3 things. What would those 3 things be? What are they for you, maybe? And what would that advice be for those listening?
For me right now, and I think it applies the same for everybody listening to this, and I think it goes back to the summary of a conversation that we had today. Number one is just having a plan every day. That's number one. Number two is focusing on what's within your control, and a lot of times it's also, and I guess like number three is focus on being fully present. I think we're just kind of living so much on like the what's gonna happen and how long this is still going to last, and like thinking about the tomorrow, and we didn't really kind of taking the time to really focus on today and what are we trying to, like, even today as like us as entrepreneurs, people listening to this as like clients and people trying to improve their health. We're always focusing on what's next, like, how can we get more clients, how can I lose more fat, like how long is this going to take, and we're just so like fixated on the future that we don't necessarily take the time to really be present. So creating a plan and schedule to set really strong routines, number one, and making sure that number two, you are completely forgot. I'm blank on number two. Control the controllables, which is going to be key. And number three, making sure that you're being present and focus on what's in front of you right now and not necessarily what hasn't happened yet, which again, it goes back to number two, is completely outside of your control.
Love it, man. I love it. Hey, real quick, tell the listeners a little bit more about what is dropping. Well, crap, today's Wednesday and it's dropping
Yeah.
Saturday. So
Yeah, no worries.
yeah,
I'll talk about it and I'll tell what we did, but at the same time, we can talk about other things that we're going on, and by the time that this episode drops, so
yeah.
so people can still kind of do it. So this Saturday, so we're recording this on April 15th, so Saturday's the 18th. We did, I'm guessing, as people listening to this will be in the past, so we did a virtual nutrition summit. So it was a full day event in which we did, live workouts, cooking classes. We did a full gamut of things, a group of me and other registered dietitians, strength and conditioning coaches, recipe developers, and it was a good way for us to kind of produce or to raise money towards a good cause, like No Kid Hungry, which is a national campaign that is trying to help feed hungry kids. That right now, because of the fact that the schools are closed, are not really kind of getting fed because they're part of school lunch programs. So we're trying to kind of support them any way we can. So that happened in the past, as the time you're listening to this, but we also have we're currently, I wrote a very extensive, some of the things that I talked about today about building routines and stuff like that. I wrote a very extensive, I call it a COVID-19 survival guide, which has a lot of the things that I outlined today. And it's actually a free download that people can put, and basically you can put it on the show notes so people can maybe download it, and they can have access to directly to this guide, so they can maybe get something more tangible that they can kind of use more than just a podcast. So that's kind of something that we created during this time that maybe help people in some way, shape, or form, and some direction as far as their nutrition and their health and fitness. So that's something else. And of course, if you want to reach out directly to me, you can find me a few different places. You can find me on Instagram. Now I am on TikTok, so that's another big cool thing about the pandemic that kind of get me started on. And also, of course, our YouTube channel and our podcast, Viva Nutrition Radio, also where we bring in podcast guests from all over to try to kind of share their experience and their knowledge. So, but the best way to reach out directly to me is going to be through Instagram currently. So, those are like some of the few things that we got going on.
Awesome. I love it, my man. Well, Andreas, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you.